King David cries. Even our prophet Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, cries. Jacob and Esav, Jacob and Esav, when they had their reunion as brothers, they wept on each other's shoulders. And all the women in the Bible and the Torah, they're crying all the time. But nobody cries as much as Joseph. Nobody cries as much as Joseph, and it's all recorded in the text. He cries not once, not twice, but 8 times is the mention of him crying in the text. And this isn't light crying. This is very, very intense sobbing. This is uncontrollable emotions. This is crying that is accompanied with a flood of tears. And mind you, this is very rare in the Torah. The style of the Torah is not so much to bring attention to what the characters look like, what they're thinking inside, what feelings they might be having inside, their emotions. The Torah basically focuses on their actions. So this is very, very rare, and the question is, if the Torah is here to teach us lessons about life and nothing is random, why bring attention to Yosef, to Joseph? Why bring so much focus 8 times over to Joseph and his tears? And that's what today's class is all about, is what can we possibly learn from Joseph's tears? So in order to examine this and to bring to surface some kind of learning and wisdom, we have to look at the times Joseph cried and the context and when he didn't cry. And we're going to begin with all the times Joseph didn't cry. Joseph does not cry when he is jumped, kidnapped, and thrown into a pit with venomous snakes and scorpions by his own siblings. When as a hostage he is sold to a caravan of Arabs who take him to a distant land. When he is sold into slavery to Potiphar. When as a slave he is seduced by his master's wife, who then frames him for rape. When he is sentenced to a very lengthy prison time. When he befriends another inmate, the butler, who forgets his promise to remember Joseph when he is released. When he is left to rot in prison, having been betrayed by his own family, employer, and friends. Joseph does not cry when he is under immediate threat or uncertain of his fate, as he must have been under these circumstances, but instead he maintains the ability to stay focused, developing mental toughness, the capacity to handle stress, maintaining composure under pressure, adapting to changing circumstances, and not succumbing to fear or panic. The call of the hour for Joseph is to develop a warrior mindset, which includes the ability to endure hardship, setbacks, and obstacles in high-pressure situations, and to stay determined through it all through his faith in God, as well as to strengthen his moral values, integrity, and his code of honor. After all, he is an Israelite. So when does an Israelite cry? Well, we'll look in the text and see when Joseph cries, because it's the same thing. Joseph cries when he renews his contact with his brothers, with his father, with his family, When it comes to family or anything that symbolizes home, Joseph cries. A Jew cries. A true Israelite cries. When it comes to our parents, our grandparents, their stories of survival. When it comes to our holy children or our beloved homeland Israel, we cry. Anything to do with home and family, we cry. And it has nothing to do with whether we have good ties with our homeland, with our siblings, with our parents. We can be estranged from our family, from our tribe. We can be outcasts. We can be the castaway stones, right? That were thrown, that were tossed out. Yet it doesn't stop us from crying. Why? Because tears don't come from a rational place. There is no reason why we still cry whether we've been cut off or reconnected with our family. Joseph, by the way, he never reestablished that connection and bond with his brothers, ever. Even after they arrived in Egypt after 17 years, that he provided them with financial abundance, material prosperity, spiritual prosperity in Goshen in Egypt, he never quite reestablished his connection to his brothers, yet he still cries over them. Because when it comes to family, when it comes to home, our tears are not coming from a place of reason. You know, what is the holiest site for the Jew, right? We know the Muslims have Mecca. Baruch Hashem, the Catholics have the Vatican. What do the Jews have? They have one wall, a wall of broken stones. And what is the name of that wall? The remnant of a once standing ancient temple we once had. What is the name? The Wailing Wall. And what do we do when we go there? We cry. And we don't know why. We cry. See, because the tears are coming from such a deep place, it has nothing to do with reason. We don't cry after coming to some intellectual conclusion of what this wall represents. We touch the stones. We get within proximity of that wall of broken stones and we start sobbing. And we don't know why. And that's the point. It's not coming from up here. It's coming from deep, deep, deep within here. And that is the Kabbalah of tears. That is what Judaism and the Torah and that wisdom path of the Israelites have come to teach us about tears. Because, you see, the word eyes, tears come from the eyes, and the word eyes in Hebrew is ayin. Ayin also means a wellspring. So when there is no water on the surface and you dig deep enough, you will arrive at water. And what is the function of a well? It's to bring the water that is deep, deep, deep within and to bring it to the surface and to expose and release it. It's no different than what we do when we cry tears, when Joseph cries tears. The tears are not there to define you. The tears are there to refine you. So in the Hasidic tradition, we say when a person cries, it's the mikvah of the eyes. A mikvah is the same, for those of you familiar with baptism, if you're not Jewish, this is the idea of going into water and coming out elevated, coming out purified and cleansed, spiritually cleansed. So when Jewish people go into the mikvah, we don't go in with clothes. We go in the same way we came into the world, with nothing. So with no clothes, we go into a natural body of water, and we dunk in, And the idea, Jewish law says that all the parts of the body must be exposed to the water, except there's one thing that doesn't have contact with the water, and that's the eyes. Because when you go underneath the water, your eyes are closed. So the Hasidic master says it doesn't matter, because when you shed a tear, when you begin weeping, it's the mikveh of the eyes. And what is the mikveh of the eyes? If the eyes are the window to the soul, it means that when you cry, your way of seeing the world becomes more clear afterwards. It becomes more cleansed, more purified. And that's why if you can see the world in a new way, with new eyes, with purified way of seeing everything, how could you not cry? How could you bypass the luxury of shedding a few tears in order to see the world in a new way? You know, the Talmud says that when the destruction of the temple happened in Jerusalem 2,000 years ago, that all the gates of prayer were closed. But there is one gate that God says always remains open, and that's the gate of tears. So what does it mean for us in our own life is even when we don't have access to our higher power, to Hashem, to our blessed God Creator, even when we feel we're not connecting and our prayers may not be heard, God forbid. If you cry when you pray, it goes directly direct express to Shemaim, to heaven. The gates of tears are always left open. And of course, the Kotzker Rebbe says, and I'll leave us with this, is that there's nothing more whole than a broken heart. You know, when we get married with a ring, right? The ring has a little hole in it, right? That represents the little hole in our hearts. The little place in us that is a little incomplete, that always remains incomplete. Because if you were already a complete person with no cracks in your heart, with no tears to shed, if you're already complete and whole, what are you getting married for, right? Don't get married, stay single. We get married because we have a hole to fill in our hearts. Because there's water at the depth of our wells inside. There's still life inside of us. As long as you can cry, it's a sign of life. It's a sign that you can still feel Baruch Hashem. Thank God you could still feel. Because that's what we came into the world to feel. So what do we learn from this parsha? What do we learn from Yosef HaTzadik, Joseph the righteous one? Is that there, just like King Solomon said, there's a time and season and purpose for everything under heaven. Joseph knew when to cry and when it wasn't time to cry. When it comes to facing danger, when it comes to facing uncertainty, Joseph didn't cry. Nor did Joseph ever play the victim card, even though he had every single reason in the world. But he never played that card. He had more honor, more dignity than to identify as a victim. And so there were no tears for Joseph during those moments where he had to remain focused as a warrior. But you can't be a warrior without the tears, because you need to continue cleansing. You need to know what it is you are fighting for, what it is you're staying alive for, what it is you're still on the planet for. And that's what it means to be a real Israelite. So friends, until next time, may we only go from strength to strength. May we only learn more deeper and more beautiful ways to serve God and to serve each other. And and to never stop crying until the world is elevated and complete, because there's still so much work we need to be doing. So from strength to strength, I'll see you next week. God bless. Shalom.